Hello, Fox Fairy, where I talk about marginalized subjects from a marginalized viewpoint, while I learn to draw. Hello, welcome to the series LGBT 101, where we educate you on LGBT topics. Today, we'll be discussing the history of the LGBT community and important LGBT historical figures. Picture this, June 28, 1969. You're at Stonewall Inn in Greenwich Village, New York City. The police pile in, arresting people, raiding the premises. Before you know it, someone was hit, something was thrown. Whatever it was, this was the event that began the gay rights movement as we knew it. This was the Stonewall riots. 3 newspapers were made to address gay and lesbian experiences shortly after this event, addressing important issues and news for LGBT subjects. On June 28, 1970, the first Pride March took place. There were several more in Chicago, Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco the following years. The Reminder Day pickets from 1965 to 1969 were shifted to remember the Stonewall riots. LGBT History Month was started on 1994, which eventually was reassigned to Pride Month, and in the late 70s and early 1980s, due to the events of the Stonewall riots, there was hostility in the LGBT community. Lesbians and gays were hostile towards bisexuals and trans people. At this stage in time, the LGBT community, which was known as the Gay Rights Movement or the Gay and Lesbian Liberation Movements, were much more conservative in their beliefs. They remained the gay rights movements and the gay and lesbian rights movements for a while, until eventually the B was added when the community got more of a liberal shift, and eventually after that, the T was added once the unification had finally set in. Who are some important figures to note when thinking about LGBT history? Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin was a black gay man, and he was the organizer for the civil rights movement, and he is responsible for organizing the 1947 Freedom Ride. He introduced Gandhi's philosophies to Martin Luther King, and was working hard for the gay rights movement until his death. Harvey Milk. Harvey Milk was a gay man, and he was an ex-conservative. He sponsored many LGBT rights bills and eventually was assassinated on November 28, 1978, before which he wrote a speech encouraging young LGBT people to come into the public eye, because he believed that if people knew that LGBT people weren't someone they didn't know, if people knew that LGBT people were people they'd see on a daily basis and talk to every day, there would be less hatred and thus more rights awarded towards us. Alan Turing. In World War II, Alan Turing invented a machine that could decode messages sent by the Axis powers to each other, turning the tide of the war and enabling the Allies to win the entire war. If it weren't for him, it's likely that many battles in World War II would have been lost. Alan Turing, which you may not know, was persecuted for homosexual acts, so he was likely an Achillean man. They don't tell you this because normally voices of LGBT people are silenced, and normally cases of important historical figures being a minority gets silenced as well. This is just another example of the media and public schools trying to hide gay men and other minorities from the public eye, contributing to more erasure. Emilio Robles Avila. Born in 1889, was a colonel during the Mexican Revolution. He was FTM. He was widely accepted by his family and society as he knew it, and he would threaten anyone calling him a woman with a pistol. Sadly, though, his grave was marked with the feminine pronunciation of his name. It wasn't until a college was founded with his masculine name until his identity was respected in more recent times. Barbara Giddings, 1958, was an American activist who organized the New York Daughters of Bilitis, the first lesbian civil rights organization. And she worked hard to get the American Psychiatric Association to remove homosexuality as a medical condition. In 1920, Stormé Delaviri, a mixed-race butch lesbian, was born. She was popular in the LGBT community then. She was known as the guardian of the lesbians and was a performer/bodyguard. She was known as the Rosa Parks of the gay lesbian rights movement because it is believed that her fight with the police is the event that sparked the Stonewall riots. Christina Jorgensen. Do you recall the newspaper heading, "XGI becomes blonde beauty"? Well, this is that woman. The first popularizing example of gender reassignment surgery in America. She was a successful actor and singer, and before she completed her transition, she was an active member in World War II as a clerical worker. She was born in 1926. Dana Zim, born in 1958, had their application for a passport denied for not selecting a binary gender option on their form. They were an ex-veteran, and they felt very frustrated that they were being disrespected in this way. So they took it up with the courts and became the first person in America with an X-marked passport, and the first veteran legally recognized as non-binary in America. Born in 1946, Stephen Donaldson was a bi rights activist known for his pioneering in LGBT rights and prison reform. He served in the Navy from 1970 to 1972 and spoke out about his identity as a Buddhist Quaker and felt as if the homophobic environment in the Quaker community made him feel unwelcome. Not only this, but he felt unwelcome in the gay liberation movement because it wasn't accepting of his bisexuality. And he and his friends, who are also Buddhist Quakers, contribute to the Statement on Bisexuality, which defined bisexuality for the time. Sheila Lambert, 1956, founder and director of the Bisexual Book Awards, Bi Writers Association, co-founder of the Bi Women of All Colors. She wrote several articles for the Huffington Post, The Advocate, Alter Ellen, Alter Elton, Bi Magazine, and Lambia Literary Foundation. She made several large contributions to the community, making us quite available in the public eye. What are some common misconceptions? There's a common misconception that Marsha P. Johnson started the Stonewall riots. Everyone always says the Stonewall riots were started by a black trans woman. And this is false. For one, Marsha P. Johnson was not trans. Marsha P. Johnson was a drag queen. For two, Marsha P. Johnson didn't make it to the Stonewall riots until after the rioting had begun. It was actually Stormé Delaviri who started this, which I think it's important to remember because Stormé Delaviri was a mixed black American. Not only this, but she was a butch lesbian. I think it's quite misogynistic to hide a woman's important actions behind that of a man, even if this man is a drag queen. These voices are so often silenced, why should we go about silencing them? We shouldn't reduce ourselves to the same actions as the patriarchal society that we are actively trying to escape, because it harms so many of us. Alright, that's all for now. This was a little bit of a short one, but researching this subject is quite difficult because I can't quite tell how much of this information is true, and I have to find extremely substantial historical figures. I did as much research as I could have on this subject, and I hope I presented this information quite well. I'll see you in my next video. I love you.